What the hell is up with you today? Are you high?
Young life, I'll be here. Young life.
Rick and Morty. At this point we all know about these bastards. I mean, between the entirely oversaturated Pickle Rick meme and the Szechuan sauce fiasco and the dragon orgy. Look, Rick and Morty's got a particular style of humor, one that I'm not too keen on, at least not past the first couple of seasons. Like, remember when the plot was Morty's dog in a mech suit trying to take over the world? Now it's incest. Yeah, sure, okay. Anyway, one of the show's creators, Justin Roiland, actually founded his own video game studio, Squanch Tendo, now Squanch Games, back in 2016. You may or may not have heard of Accounting or Trover Saves the Universe, but undoubtedly the studio's biggest game to date is High on Life, a game that's racked up a bit of notoriety for daring to ask, what if we made the most annoying game possible? High on Life has an interesting premise. It's a first-person shooter with some Metroidvania elements where the main draw is the guns themselves are characters, who talk to you during combat and comment on things, etc, etc. I think that idea is pretty neat. Unfortunately, this idea's been married with current Rick and Morty style of humor, which is to present a potentially humorous situation, then repeat the punchline to said situation ad nauseum until a consistency of blood pouring from my ears is achieved. And I think it's worse here in High on Life because said humorous situations aren't exactly funny to begin with. Now, full disclaimer before I get into this, humour is subjective. You might get a chuckle or a hearty chortle out of the game yourself, but for one example, this dollar store Ziltoid is in the business of selling alien cum. He goes on and on about how much other people love buying the cum he offers, about how it's the finest cum around, and even gives you a free sample, a gallon of alien cum that sits in your inventory for the rest of the game and gives you an achievement for beating the game with it on you. Even if you ignore the optional dialogue choices, this scenario stretches itself out at least 5 times longer than it needs to, and the eventual punchline that he can't sell you more cum right now because he needs time to rest is lost, because by that point you've checked out and just want to move on. Another example of its awful humour is this little fucker. In the first level he starts following you around, telling you his life story or commenting on things you do in the most irritating fucking way possible.
Oh, like I was saying. So, I joined the D3 out of desperation! And it's still something! Anything. I've been aimless most of my life. I'm alone here, to be honest, and just in a valley covered with sludge and Fergles. But at least the Fergles don't judge me. My, you're sipping on mine!
We gotta get through here fast!
The two guns you have by this point both acknowledge that this guy is the most annoying goddamn thing on the planet, but eventually you're able to kill him, as if the game's saying, hey, as a reward for putting up with this puntable little shit, we'll let you kill him. This game dares to allocate the annoying little shit who will never shut the fuck up status to a single character in a game where no one ever shuts the fuck up, showing that the game has absolutely no self-awareness. I think the writing's gonna turn a fair few people away from this one, and yeah, understandably so. Like, sure, there are sliders in the options menu to adjust how frequently your guns and the silly aliens you fight spew annoying clips, but that doesn't make the long stretches of dialogue any more skippable than they currently are. Spoiler alert, that's the kind of skippable. And personally, I only really laughed a few times. For example, once, because I recognized the voice of Zach Fatal, aka Psychic Pebbles, and he's got a funny voice. Or another time, because the melee weapon is a foul-mouthed Aussie who says cunt, and Aussie's swearing is always funny, even as a native thong wearer myself.
I'll slice them to fucking death. I'll cut their fucking heads off. I'll rip their limbs. I'll fucking do everything. I'm gonna fucking cut right into them. I'll cut their fucking asshole off and eat it.
And again, humor's subjective, but High on Life only really has maybe 4 or 5 types of jokes up its sleeve. Joke 1, someone does something really messed up and one of the guns calls them out on it. Joke 2, gee whiz, this sure is a video game. Joke 3, gee fucking whiz, this sure fucking is a fucking video game. Fuck! Joke 4. Man, I sure do love stammering a lot to draw out the dialogue as much as possible. I like repeating the punchline as much as possible until you fucking hate me and never want to use me again and replace me with the fucked up gun that gives birth to babies that you fire at enemies. Like how gross is that? He's popping babies out of his whatever every few seconds for you to just fling it at enemies. Isn't that kind of fucked up? That's kind of fucked up, right? It's not just me. That's fucked. That's fucked up. That's fucked up, right? That he uses his babies as ammo? That's kind of fucked up. Joke 5. Whoa, a trippy boss. What is this? The critically acclaimed Metal Gear Solid? Whoa, a skate park. What is this? The much beloved Tony Hawk's Pro Skater? Whoa, a hole. What is this? The hit indie game Donut County?
Another hole. What is this? The hit indie game Donut County?
Jesus Christ, game, I was being slightly hyperbolic. You know what really stings though? When you put aside all the awful writing and the bad jokes, the game's actually kinda good. No, for real, there's actually a really neat little game hidden underneath all the dumb alien guns never zipping their lips. Even if the gameplay itself is not without its own issues, I ended up completing the game in 3 days because it kinda had me hooked. The combat and exploration was a lot of fun, harkening back to the days where games were 6 hours long, unabashedly linear, and all the better for it. At its core is the combat system, which I've heard referred to as Discount Doom, and they're not far off the mark. There's an emphasis on staying on the move at all times, which is backed up by having a pretty good selection of traversal options that gradually unlock as you play. The dodge move is a bit pitiful, but you can upgrade it to the slide bash, which lets you slide into enemies and send them flying, or quickly zip out of combat and let your health recharge, and it's pretty satisfying. You also get a jetpack, which lets you hover in midair for a short time and rain glob shots from above, and your melee weapon also doubles as a grappling hook. You definitely feel like a bit of a badass moving around the battlefield at times, and each combat encounter is pretty well designed so that you're always moving and swinging about effortlessly. Yeah, I don't like the guns though. I mean, only because, as we previously established, they don't know how to put a gosh dang cork in it, but if we ignore that they're insufferable pricks for a moment, they're pretty good when it comes to applying bullet to alien head. There are only 6 weapons overall, 4 main guns, a melee weapon, and an instant wind gun you get for the final 20 minutes, but it's a pretty good little lineup, and they get upgrades and alt fires and stuff to make things more interesting. Kenny's your starter pistol, but unlike, say, most other pistols in gaming, they retain their usefulness for the entire game with very good damage output and accuracy and a very fun trick shot that lets you juggle enemies mid-air. Gus is the shotgun, shaped like a frog. Where have I seen this before? But he also fires discs that ricochet off enemies, and ADS sucks enemies in close for a point-blank shot. I wish his damage output was a bit higher considering his fire rate and clip size is pretty low, but he's still a fun guy to slide bash into combat with. Sweezy is a needler in all but name, and the fact that she can shoot time bombs that you can shoot at to make explode, I guess. And Creature, yes that's literally his name, gives birth to little me-seeks looking dudes that latch onto enemies for continuous damage and also do the funny mind control thing, like the Infector from Ratchet & Clank 3 if it wasn't a giant piece of crap. Even Knifey, the melee weapon, is pretty good, as for some reason he has godlike range and can kill some of the stronger enemies in 2 or 3 hits. It's a small selection of weapons, sure, but each weapon has its place in combat, and I don't think I really neglected any of them, though this is probably due in part to swapping to different weapons and using their trick shots while others recharge theirs, which is a smart way of getting people to use every weapon, I think. Enemy variety's decent. It feels a bit shit at first because most enemies are the same shade of cyberpunk yellow, but I reckon there's enough variety to last the game's 8 or so hours. I really like the way they go about displaying an enemy's health. Rather than displaying a big ol' health bar above their heads, they'll slowly be drained of their color as they take damage until they're wrinkly grey imitations of their former selves. Oh, and the bosses, dude! They actually kicked my ass a bit. Some of them feel a bit old school where you attack them in phases before they send out goons or you gotta start dodging stuff for a few seconds, but others are relentless. They don't give you any breathing room to sit back and recharge your health. The Screndel brothers in particular, they had me dropping a few profanities, I tell you what. I don't know if they were actually harder, I'm just bad at video games, it's probably the latter. Outside of combat, the game's a bit of a Metroidvania light. You'll be returning to old levels often, mostly because there's only really 3 main levels and new bounties will simply have you go to new areas within each of these levels, but also because you'll gain new abilities that let you access new areas. The game doesn't do a lot with your abilities if you follow the critical story path, but if you choose to go off and explore, you'll be tested a little bit more than you would be otherwise, and exploring is genuinely worth it too. You'll find chests that give you currency to spend on new upgrades, significantly more than enemies drop, or you'll find upgrades themselves, unique ones that you can't buy in shops. Exploration is generally pretty fun. And I think jumping back and forth between levels so much for the story helps with this because, for example, you'll be asked to go back to the desert world, then your radar will pick up a nearby collectible, so you run off and nab it, and then another one appears on your radar and you run off and get that. Then you might spy a nearby rooftop you couldn't reach before, and then suddenly you're on the other side of the map and have completely forgotten that you're supposed to be going to kill someone or whatever the story wants you to do. Again, there are only 3 worlds to explore, save for Earth, which appears at the start and end of the game and is just a corridor of enemies, and there's not a lot of variety in its environment. There's a city overlooking a slum, a forest near a mining operation, and the desert level hides a neon-soaked city beneath it, so there's not a lot to explore, but what is there is still enjoyable to poke around in. And the levels have memorable enough layouts that the lack of a map, while kinda silly regardless, wasn't too much of an issue. There's also these warp disk things, like you go to designated parts of an area and can warp in small chunks of other planets, and I can't work out what most of them are actually for. There's this skate park one that gave me some money for beating a challenge, but the others I did, smashing up a miniature town, solving the trolley problem, and connecting pipes to help some alien eat another alien's never-ending dookie. It was like the reward was the joke they were trying to tell, and I'm sorry, but there's nothing less I would like to collect for completion than a fucking high on life joke. That's the thing though, I wish this game was funny. I wish the game had halfway competent writing and jokes that didn't go for 3 minutes too long, because I think this would have been a cult classic in the making. Hell, maybe it will be, because as far as I can tell, people really dig the humor. Everyone on Twitter was bashing it for being the most obnoxious and exhausting game ever made, but then you go on YouTube and TikTok and you look at comments under reviews of it and it's largely the exact opposite reaction. They'll be like, wow, this is the funniest game ever! And they post a clip where you shove a gun up the villain's arsehole or you shoot that one 30-year-old child or whatever. But like I've said several times now, humor is subjective, and that humor is likely going to be the deciding factor on whether you play High on Life or not. If you like the writing, you're gonna have a great time, because there's a pretty competent game hidden beneath the foul-mouthed alien guns. It's a fun Metroidvania, it looks pretty great apart from the Homer Simpson-ass alien NPCs, and combat's pretty engaging. But if the humor's not your cup of tea, there's a good chance the game might not be worth persevering with, considering how much of the game is the humor. For me, personally, the gameplay just barely outweigh the egregious humor, but for others, it might not be enough. If you have Game Pass, give it a try anyway. Maybe you'll be pleasantly surprised, maybe you'll hate its guts. That's the beauty of Game Pass, and I'm not just shilling because they sent me a code for a subscription. I've been subscribed to this service almost uninterrupted for the past few years, you know? It's good, because you get games like this and you think, maybe it'll be fun. Well, I don't know if I'll vibe with it or not. But instead of having to whip out $100 and risking paying for a game you might not like because no one knows how to make a gosh dang demo these days, if you're on Game Pass, you can download it hassle-free, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. Boom. Banished from your hard drive forever, and then you go install Tinykin instead because Tinykin slaps. Big thanks to Furball, Sofox, Aetheric Ruby, K, Damien Maxted, Nation McAltal, Soul Gaming 1, Feeny Shay, Heathoot Skyet, Jayet, Johanna Sanderson, Kurota the Kitsune, Pear Basket, Philip Elk, Rodent Bird, Scadius Grim, Squid Superstar, The Dervinator, Sadie Killer, and Chris Fireball. Support me on Patreon, follow me on Twitter, wow, Twitter's still up, holy shit. And be sure to give your raccoon friends a trash. A trash.